I'm so lonesome I could cry.
Imagine cracking open a medical file so startling you can almost hear the coroner's pen tremble. Country music adores neon signs and broken hearts, but the one thing it never wants you to study is the final set list hidden beneath a crisp hospital sheet. Today we flip through pages stamped confidential, revealing 13 voices that crooned louder after silence than they ever did on stage. Every detail that follows lives in ink. The only fiction was the spotless image sold to ticket buyers. From morphine cocktails to vanished bullet fragments, these autopsies read like outlaw ballads scrawled on police stationery. And with each drawer we slide open, I'll hand you a clue, then slam it shut before the echo fades, daring you to keep your eyes wide. Strap in. The first legend left this world in the back seat of a midnight Cadillac, and what doctors found inside him never made the liner notes, ever again, until now. Ready? Let's begin. Hank Williams Sr. looked invincible when he bent a note until it cried, yet the man who hoisted the Grand Ole Opry on his shoulders spent New Year's Eve 1952 twitching in the rear of a pale blue Cadillac. When the driver nudged him awake outside Oak Hill, West Virginia, Hank was already ice cold at 29. The coroner unsealed his chest and found a heart scarred like old pine, its tissue riddled with damage closer to a pensioner than a prodigy. His blood shimmered with morphine, chloral hydrate, and enough whiskey residue to pickle a jukebox. Rumors swirled that a freelance doctor had handed him dangerous injections labeled merely vitamins, trying to tame the shakes before a show. Managers blamed weather, fans blamed fate. The file blamed overprescription so reckless it bordered on malpractice. Even stranger, the toxic brew registered as physician grade, suggesting somebody who should have known better pressed the plunger. Hank's label rushed tributes to radio, but inside the morgue a pathologist whispered, "This heart quit long before the wheel did." The unofficial verdict? Medicine turned outlaw, and country's brightest comet paid the overdue tab. A silent, unstoppable backstage collapse. Johnny Paycheck spent the 80s swearing he'd cleaned up, flashing a sober grin that fooled more cameras than bandmates. Yet when he slipped away in 2003, the autopsy read like a relapse diary written across every failing organ. His liver resembled cracked earth, his kidneys shriveled, and tucked inside the toxic soup were active traces of methadone and painkillers nobody had prescribed in months. Technicians gasped at the contradiction. A public redemption tour running parallel to private torment. Friends insisted he'd traded the bottle for Bible study. The tissue slides disagreed, glowing under ultraviolet with chemicals that kept applause-time ghosts at bay. One forensic note circled an unsettling detail. The drug levels were low enough to suggest maintenance rather than mayhem, meaning Paycheck may have died pacing his dose, chasing relief, not euphoria. That nuance never reached talk show couches. Stations played, "Take this job and shove it," while pundits polished the narrative of a redeemed outlaw. But the microscope exposed the lonelier truth. Even a gentle drip of synthetic comfort can drown a man already treading water. Paycheck clocked out with no showdown, just a quiet surrender his chart couldn't hide completely. Tammy Wynette's voice could make the toughest trucker pull over and cry, but her final paperwork made prosecutors sharpen their pencils. When she died in 1998, the official line read "natural causes," yet a private autopsy commissioned by her daughters revealed a pharmaceutical constellation, more than 20 prescription compounds orbiting the bloodstream at once. Painkillers tangoed with tranquilizers, antihistamines clashed with sedatives, and the pathologist wrote that even a healthy body would have buckled under that chorus. The lawsuit that followed alleged negligent doctors, sloppy record-keeping, and a tour schedule greased by refills on demand. Tabloids had long whispered that the First Lady of Country built a pill pyramid just to step on stage. The report finally carved those rumors in bone. Strangest of all, her death certificate stayed unchanged, like a stage curtain frozen mid-show. Fans queued for memorials, unaware that in a downtown office someone was measuring capsules against malpractice affidavits. One coroner's memo ended with a line rarely seen: administration undetermined, clinical significance high. Translation? Nobody could prove who handed her the last bottle, but the evidence screamed that whoever did played doctor, dealer, and executioner in one single fatal encore. Keith Whitley spent his short life proving that a voice can soar even while its owner is sinking. On May 9, 1989, his blood alcohol registered at 0.47, nearly 6 times the legal limit and high enough to knock most men unconscious after a single glass. Yet he'd been walking, talking, playing with the family dog minutes before collapsing. The autopsy painted a grisly timeline. Esophageal lining raw, stomach eerily empty, veins carrying ethanol like jet fuel straight to a heart already scarred by binge and break pledges to quit. Friends recalled half-drunk vows whispered into telephone receivers at dawn. Producers scheduled comeback dates, believing the worst was behind him. The report showed otherwise. Whitley's tolerance had climbed so brutally that what should have been a blackout became breakfast. A single toxicologist scribbled the metaphor that stuck. Not even the gold records on his walls could muffle the slow-ticking countdown. He didn't drown. He evaporated. Country radio softened the tragedy into a cautionary ballad, but between microscope slides lay a louder refrain. Addiction sometimes learns to wear a tuxedo, smiling for cameras until the minute it decides the show is over. Elvis Presley straddled genres like a rhinestone comet, but by the summer of 1977, he also straddled 2 bathroom rugs, clutching his chest in a mansion built of legend and pharmaceuticals. The autopsy revealed an enlarged heart heavy as wet cement, a colon snarled like a knotted garden hose, and 14 distinct prescription compounds parading through his blood. The official word was heart failure, yet insiders whispered that years of pill-for-every-ailment doctor shopping had turned the king's body into a chemistry experiment. One examiner noted that certain drug levels were staggered, hinting Elvis dosed in shifts to stay upright through midnight rehearsals. Even more chilling, every organ examined showed stages of dependency, a domino trail proving this wasn't one reckless binge but a slow-motion cave-in. The estate sealed photographs, Graceland reopened like a shrine, merch tables flourished, just a choir of white tablets humming muted jailhouse blues all. Meanwhile, tucked inside a Memphis file cabinet, a pathologist typed the sentence, "Chronic polypharmacy contributed." Translated from Latin and legalese, it meant the king didn't just leave the building, he was pushed by a parade of bottles that knew his backdoor code. George Jones earned the nickname No-Show for missing gigs, but when the final curtain dropped in 2013, his lungs and liver proved he'd actually shown up. Just to every round poured on the road. The autopsy blamed respiratory failure, yet documented tissue damage so advanced it stunned even veteran examiners. His lungs were leathered from tobacco, his liver patched and scarred, and his throat lined with calluses from decades of bourbon-soaked howls. One doctor wrote that the miracle wasn't that Jones died, but that he survived long enough to sing beside younger stars who hadn't yet ruined their own organs. Ironically, the possum had embraced relative sobriety late in life, still internal scars read like score marks on an overplayed record. Anatomy doesn't delete old tracks. Even after rehab, the damage spun on, revealing silent years when every encore cost another inch of breath. Fans mourned the outlaw who cheated death so often it felt like part of the act, never realizing the final tally was already etched deep in tissue long before the breathing stopped. Inside the lab, techs whispered that his organs looked like burned barroom wallpaper remnants. Patsy Cline's voice still flutters over diners at midnight, but the body that birthed that purity arrived at the morgue in pieces. After her plane nosedived into Tennessee woods in 1963, identification relied solely on dental charts and the heels of her blood-spattered stage shoes. The autopsy listed multiple blunt force traumas, but gossip buzzed about a pilot short on hours and maybe long on courage juice. No official report confirmed intoxication or mechanical failure. Still, fragments of cockpit glass embedded in her skull suggested the impact came without warning. One investigator quietly noted an unlatched landing gear lever, a mystery that vanished from the public file like cigarette smoke. Fans clung to vinyl while widowed conspiracy hunters mapped theories, yet the final truth hid in crushed bones. Fame can't outshout gravity. As coroner lights flickered, someone placed her rhinestone belt buckle in an evidence bag, shining brighter than any answer authorities ever released. One rumor claimed she begged the pilot to climb out of low fog, another that engine sputters were hushed to save insurance payouts. The file's margins hold erased pencil marks, proof that somebody edited history mid-sentence that night. David "Stringbean" Akeman made crowds howl on Hee Haw, but the laughter died the night robbers waited inside his modest Tennessee cabin in 1973. The autopsy told a blunt story. 2 close-range gunshots, chest and head, no defensive wounds, meaning the banjo picker barely had time to blink. Investigators found cash stuffed in mason jars beneath floorboards, unspent Opry wages he didn't trust to banks, yet his killers walked away with less than a week's pay. The medical examiner noted powder burns so tight the muzzle likely brushed fabric, an execution more than a burglary gone wrong. Fans wept at the funeral, but backstage whispers turned to rural paranoia. Who tipped the killers about the cash? Court transcripts later revealed teenage perpetrators, but the lingering question remained why Stringbean's gentle caution failed him that evening. His corpse carried one more secret, an index finger fractured long before that night. Proof that even entertainers known for grins sometimes rehearse through pain. In the end, the banjo stayed silent while the autopsy became the loudest ballad he ever played. Technicians said the entry wounds were small, but the silence they caused was colossal. Marty Robbins could gun a stock car around Daytona and still hit every high note, but his heart was plotting a different finish line. By 1982, surgeons had rerouted his arteries through multiple bypasses, hoping to buy the singer another encore. The autopsy revealed those grafts failed like frayed extension cords, leaving a cardiovascular map of heroic attempts and cruel limitations. Plaque built castles in every vessel, scar tissue stitched together previous interventions. The muscle itself looked overworked, like a drummer forced to keep tempo without sleep. A pathologist's aside read, "Advanced damage inconsistent with available medical compliance, medicalese for he postponed doom by sheer will." Days before collapse, Robbins joked on stage about needing new spark plugs, masking fatigue behind cowboy banter. Inside the lab, his aorta told a grimmer joke. Every punchline ended in arterial rupture. Family members took solace that he died near Nashville, the town he loved, yet the report's final line hung colder than any winter ballad: irreversible myocardial destruction. Translation? Even a man who wrote racing songs can't outrun the track laid inside his own chest. His engine had redlined long before anyone waved the caution flag. Dottie West spent her life singing about broken hearts, yet her own body shattered on a Tennessee highway in 1991 when a speeding Corvette swerved toward tragedy. Thrown from the passenger seat after begging the driver to slow down, she suffered internal bleeding so extensive that surgeons called it a flood. Shockingly, the crash wasn't instantly fatal. Doctors managed to chat with her, but delays in transport robbed precious minutes. The autopsy cataloged ruptured liver, lacerated spleen, multiple fractures, and slow, relentless hemorrhage. Critics argued that a medevac could have saved her. Bureaucrats blamed weather constraints. One trauma nurse later confessed that West remained joking between gasps, unaware her organs were losing the race. The final notation, exsanguination due to blunt abdominal injury, looks clinical until you imagine headlights cutting through rain while a legend bleeds in the back of an ambulance. For all her songs about timing, the cruelest verse proved that help arrived 6 beats too late. Paramedics listed her vitals on paper, each number dropping like a falling melody. Relatives later sued for negligence, but the settlement could not rewind the lonely minutes ticking loud inside that crushed car. Graham Parsons blurred the line between desert rock and twang, but his ending blurred law books. In 1973, he collapsed in a Joshua Tree motel, and the autopsy reported lethal morphine and alcohol levels swirling together like oil and water. While medical staff prepared the body for flight home, two friends stole the coffin, drove it to Cap Rock, doused it in gasoline, and lit a pyre under the stars. Sheriffs collected melted metal, but the torso was already half gone, complicating toxicology and inflaming folklore. The partial remains still confirmed narcotic overload, yet gossip claimed Graham's habit included coke, barbiturates, and anything that dulled the howl of unfinished songs. Authorities fined the body snatchers just $750, a price so small it felt like a punchline. Meanwhile, the coroner's report, stamped with giant black holes where limbs should have been, read like a campfire ghost story scrawled in bureaucratic ink. Parsons wanted his ashes scattered in the desert. Instead, his autopsy became proof that even in death, some outlaws refused to follow protocol. Pathologists sighed that he was the only patient who arrived half-cremated and still tested positive. Waylon Jennings strutted across stages with outlaw swagger, but when diabetes finally cornered him in 2002, doctors found lungs that told a different ballad. He had quit intense touring, yet autopsy slides showed emphysema etched deep from decades of six-pack-a-day smokes, each puff whittling away the rebel growl fans mistook for invincibility. The report detailed narrowed airways, calcified arteries, and nerve damage so severe his left foot had already been surrendered to amputation. Friends remembered him laughing off hospital meals, calling them prison rations, unaware his pancreas was staging a mutiny. One examiner compared his bronchi to wrinkled parchment, proof that even a booming baritone can't argue with chemistry. After the funeral, commentators praised a life well lived, but buried inside the case file sat an overlooked note: long-term nicotine abuse complicating diabetic vascular decline. Translated, Waylon's greatest duet was really between sugar and smoke, and they refused an encore. Respirators hummed backstage during his last recording, a mechanical harmony he never planned to release. Nurses charted oxygen drops in tempo, and the outlaw who once shot out studio lights was now blinded by blinking monitors all night long. Hank Snow sang of wild frontiers and open rails, yet cancer crept through his stomach like a train on a timetable no whistle could stop. When he passed in 1999, the autopsy uncovered advanced malignant lesions alongside signs of chronic internal bleeding, indicating he'd been leaking life for years, while still greeting fans with a crisp bow. Privacy walls around the Canadian legend were so high that even bandmates missed the declining color in his cheeks. One physician marveled that Snow performed seated only when cameras weren't rolling, hiding his fatigue like contraband under a tour bus bunk. Histology confirmed late-stage carcinoma, but also revealed smaller bleeds stitched up by nothing more than adrenaline and obligation. The public obituary cited natural causes, yet insiders finally admitted the singer endured chemo in secret dressing rooms between sound checks. The report's closing sentence felt like a lyric he never wrote. Extensive neoplastic infiltration, prolonged. Translation? He rode the final miles on rails made of pain, waving to the crowd so they'd never see the tracks ending under his boots. Technicians found ticket stubs in his coat pocket, souvenirs from shows he refused to cancel. 13 drawers snap shut, yet the sound keeps ringing, because every note you stream today rides on organs that paid a brutal cover charge. Autopsies are the industry's forbidden liner notes, proof that stardom can costume change into secrecy faster than any stagehand. If these reports teach anything, it's that legends are flesh first, myth second, and vulnerability last, a hierarchy written in blood typing, not billboard ink. Remember the cocktail of pills, the crash iron, the stolen coffin, the slow bleed. They're reminders that applause alone can't keep a pulse. So next time a jukebox spins one of these voices, picture the cold fluorescent lab where the final track faded out, and ask yourself which bitter verse the next superstar is already rehearsing behind a pharmacy door. Because in country music, the show never really ends. It just migrates from spotlight to microscope, waiting for someone brave enough to read the footnotes. Until then, keep your ears wary, always.